good afternoon, friends. I extend a very warm and hearty welcome to all the participants and the learned speakers to this 69th webinar on ESG, the new metrics of corporate performance. Corporate Professional is organizing this program as a part of its knowledge sharing initiative, as we are doing since last 1 year. Today's webinar is on the extremely important and contemporary topic when climate change concern and substantial development have taken center stage in global priorities, which we have seen in recently in the Glasgow, the COP26 program on climate sustainability, where Mr. Modi has attended and the entire world was there. These developments have far-reaching implications for corporate across the globe, because when a country is committing something, then this commitment is percolating to the corporates, necessitating the need for redefining their operational growth strategy. You cannot rampantly grow without bothering the other aspects of environment and sustainability. The metrics against which business are being evaluated have completely transformed. Companies, in addition to profits, product, and balance sheet, are being subject to non-financial analysis and evaluated on the basis of their efforts on environment, sustainability, and governance mechanism. We have seen in 95, 96, 97, the governance concept came. Then this concept has converted into GRC. And then above all, in 2009, CSR is also came into the picture, which is also part of this. And now combining everything is coming in as a ESG. ESG is environment, social, and governance are no more mere buzzword. Globally, there is a clarion call on the climate protection and sustainable development. Social responsiveness, besides a robust governance network. Corporates now face sustainability risks to their business, which might manifest in the form of transition risk as we move to low carbon economy, physical risk from climate related events to their asset, or even reputational risk. Investors, realizing the importance and implication of sustainability risk, now treat these as a material to their investment decision. And recently we have seen that there is a one class of investor, those who invest only in ESG compliant company. Separate mutual fund has come in the market. They are investing only in the ESG compliant company. And they are asking on all sort of issues and impact analysis and their parameters. Friends, social metrics includes workforce diversity, health and safety of employee engagement and welfare measures, social impact assessment of CSR, and other projects undertaken by the company, and data protection for private data. All these things is a part of the social fabric. The risk associated with social related issues can have serious financial implication, as there is an increasing consciousness to shun companies failing on social issues. So many international companies, they don't give work or they don't take the product if you are not following the proper social metrics. So this is compulsion for them that they should not use the child labor. They should provide the better facility to their employees. Now, similarly, each director of the company as well as board as a whole has the responsibility to acting in the best interest of the company and its various stakeholders, and not to achieve any undue gain or advantage either to themselves or their related parties or related persons. That we have seen so many things in governance. Regulators across jurisdiction are increasingly mandating ESG disclosure. SEBI, after mandating reports on corporate governance and reporting on business sustainability by corporate, has now taken the next step to mandate sustainability report along with business responsibility reporting with effect from 2022 and 23. There is a There is thus an imperative need for putting in place an ESG framework for identifying the company specific as well as industry specific environment, social and governance risk, which are now the mere metrics of measuring corporate performance. And that day is not far, which we have seen in the good governance governed company, that you may be good governed company, but you are not following the environmental part, you may not sustain in this. Friends, as I am always quoting from our Vedas and other places, that these concepts are not, this concept is not new. In Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned, Parasparam Bhavayantam Shre Param Basta Istha. Fostering each other, you shall attend to the supreme good. आप एक दूसरे का पोषण वर्धन करते हुए तुम परम कल्याण को प्राप्त कर लोगे, ये हमारे गीता का कंसेप्ट है. और अगर हम ESG की बात करें तो ESG is also talking about the same thing. So should therefore be a goal to corporate excellence, which will encompass everything required for the inclusive growth of an organization. The objective of webinar is to discuss and deliberate on the various aspects related to ESG and its importance in India. Today's program, we want to understand the ESG, why ESG is relevant today, International Convention on ESG, India versus Global Reporting Framework, VRSR and Integrated Reporting Concept, and Roadmap for Implementing ESG Framework. Friends, as you are aware, in 2009, MCA came out the CSR voluntary guidelines. Then MCA came out with National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Environmental and Economic Responsibility of Business in 2011 to encourage reporting on environment, social and governance issues. That was a voluntary guideline. Then in listing agreement, SEBI came out in 2012, business responsibility reporting as a part of annual report for top 100 listed companies. Then in 2015, SEBI came out in regulation 34(2)F of SEBI LODR 2015, and they mandated the requirement of submission of business responsibility report BRR for top 100 listed companies. Reskilling initiative taken by them from the environmental, social and governance aspects in the prescribed format. Extended the applicability to BRR reporting of 500 companies in 2016, and 2019 they have extended to 1,000 companies. From 2022-23, filing of business responsibility and sustainability reporting shall be mandatory for top 1,000 listed companies and shall replace the existing BRR. And in the entire process, if you see this, SEBI has come out their guidelines, and in the guidelines they are talking about the interesting point. They are saying that you have to quantify and you have to standardize the disclosure. So this disclosure should be matched compulsorily across all the corporates, and the investor can take better investment decision, and the company can also see the impact analysis. So these are the development which has taken place, and today we want to discuss all these points, and we want to make it that this concept which is SEBI is prescribing, corporate should be ready, because big companies have started, but ultimately it will go to all companies, listed and unlisted both. So this is our duty also to understand this concept. This is our duty to understand what SEBI is prescribing and law is prescribing we should follow, and what is the need of the world, which the government is promising to do this in 2017. They have a fixed target for zero environment, zero disposal up to 2017. Then 2050 is the target, and various companies are coming out with their own report that what is their target to achieve government's target. So this is very interesting competition will take place, and we will find so many new development in this area. So today we have with us galaxy of luminaries and visionaries who will discuss and deliberate the subject and answer your queries and interact with you. Interestingly, today we have two very well-known people, those who are working in this area since long. We have Andrag sir, He is IAS retired, founded the think tank Shaping Tomorrow Consultant LLP in 2014 to invent the future for shaping a better tomorrow. He been advising, working with ministries and state government for the last 6 years as a futuristic and governance architect. He is IAS from the government, but he is a person who thinks beyond because he is a visionary. The visionary person is who looks after something which you can't see, and he is suggesting various government, including like future ready governance, sustainable development goals, and has also been advised to UNDP, IIT, IM, and Genomics Institute, etc., which is very interesting concept. Earlier, as secretary of MCA in 2006 to 9, he introduced MCA 21 governance system, for which he received PM's award, created new governance system, and conceived and executed the globally acclaimed plan to save Satyam Computer Limited within 99 days of fraud of more than 7,000 crore. And today, that case is a yardstick for saving the Unitech and saving the IFSL. He also played a key role in operationalizing the Competition Commission of India 2009-14 as a member. And his dream project, IICA, was his brainchild, which he has created. We welcome you, sir. And today, your discussion on sustainability and futuristic vision, which is your topic, and which you discuss out of the league, we will definitely benefit it. We welcome you, sir. Then we have Mr. Upendra Bhatt. Upendra Bhatt is a founder and CEO of C Kinetics, a leading sustainability innovation and ESG strategic advisory firm. And Upendra is exclusively working in ESG. He has been over 25 years of industry consulting and investment experience with a focus on sustainability intervention. He has comprehensive expertise in global ESG framework. He is the advisor on several government committees and industry body working group on reporting and disclosure, sustainability finance, energy efficiency, and resource management. He is a special invitee Ministry of Finance Task Force on Sustainable Finance Regulation Subcommittee, member Government of India's BRIC Mission, recent past chairman of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, and chairman of Sustainable Business Leadership Forum. Mr. Upendra is not only an academician, but he is a practical person working in this ESG area since last 25 years, and we will definitely get benefited by his experience and knowledge, which we will gain today. We welcome you, Upendra Bhatt, for this program. Then we have Ankit Singh, is our own. Ankit is a company secretary and law graduate, and he is the head of corporate affairs and compliance corporate profession. He holds 15 years experience in corporate legal, advisory, due diligence, acquisition, corporate governance, foreign exchange law, and setting up business and the listed companies, various compliance aspects. He possesses sound IT knowledge and has been instrumental in successful conceptualizing and creating innovative website of the group. He has acted as guest speaker in various forums of CA, CS, IICA, and authored many articles on corporate law. He has conceptualized, designed, and edited the best-selling publication of Group on Companies Act. So friends, I welcome Ankit. These are the speakers today, and these speakers will discuss today all these aspects, and the program structure will be like this. Ankit will tell about the program, about this concept of ESG, international phenomena, what SEBI is doing. And after that, Andrag sir will speak. And then Upendra Bhatt, co-founder and MD of C Kinetics, will speak and give his practical aspects. And then today we are launching our ESG services also in corporate professional. And we are working a tie-up with C Kinetics. So we will both will get advantage of their knowledge, and we will do something good for the society, corporate, and overall our country and our entire world. So I welcome all the participants and all three speakers, and I'll request Ankit to start his presentation.
Thank you, sir, and very good evening to all of you. So, as Mr. Pawan Vijay has rightly said in the context that today ESG is the buzzword, but most of us are to some extent familiar with ESG by the meaning which this acronym actually consists of in terms of E for environment, S for social, and G for governance. While most of us are already working in some of the areas, but as a concentrated effort, neither the corporates, neither the government is working in these areas. So what does ESG? ESG, as rightly said, environment, social, governance. So all of these are areas where, as a responsible business, we are working and which require responsible conduct on part of the business and various stakeholders. While ES it stands for environment, relates to key topics where an organization should be working as a responsible citizen while operating its business and keeping in view the limits of which their actions as a corporate can harm the environment and take actions to reduce that impact. And accordingly, he includes all these things which are related to environment, which have an impact on environment, like how you use energy, water treatment, effluent, climate control, carbon footprint as an organization, what kind of carbon footprint you're creating, emission norms, waste management. Then social, it all about is related to stakeholders, labor management, and diversity and equal opportunity, data security. A lot of us are confused about whether here the social word is first of all social stand S for stands for social or sustainability. So S stands here for social, not for sustainability, and whether social here means that is it just CSR which a company is doing. So it's more than CSR. It's CSR is one of the context of social, but it extends more towards not just CSR, but to human rights, how you treat your customers, how you treat your labor force, what kind of diversity you are motivating in your company as an organization, how you are treating your local communities, data privacy, and a lot of other stuff which forms part of the social. And then comes the last point, governance. While governance is something which we all corporates are very much acquainted, being followed in terms of regulatory framework of governance set up by different regulators. But here it's beyond those governance. While in an overall sense, governance here encompasses everything as an organization, like code of conduct, how we are accountable to the society, to the regulator, to your stakeholders, how transparent you are, how well you are disclosing things to the stakeholders and regulators. All these things cumulatively, all these three forms part of the term ESG, and each of the term ESG has as its own context in respect of a corporate, and every corporate has to identify its own set of activities under each of this element E, S, and G. What's about sustainability? So sustainability and ESG are I can say part of same coins. While sustainable, to achieve sustainability to a large extent, you have to encompass ESG and implement in totality. And when you will be implementing ESG practices in your organization, it will to some extent lead you to achieving a sustainable and responsible business conduct. So sustainability has also been defined as a part of the World Report on Environment and Development, and its definition is actually very beautiful, and it sums up the actual purpose of the concept of the ESG and the need of the ESG, that development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So in very simpler sense, we have to utilize resources in such a manner that we leave enough resources for its better utilization for the generations to come. We should not look into completely compromising with the resources in such a manner that we use everything now and left a little on the plate for the generations to come. So this is all about sustainability, about how you should act responsibly. How these are connected. So the entire ESG framework across countries globally moves around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So in 2000,
can you speak little louder? Ankit, now you can speak. Sorry, yeah.
So I was speaking on the UN Sustainable Goals. So in 2015, I think UN set the agenda by laying out 17 sustainable goals. And in these 17 sustainable goals are in sum and substance of the ESG, and frameworks across the globe are actually based out on all these 17 sustainable goals, all the international reporting standards, all the directives of EU, Singapore, and all other countries. The entire sum and substance of directives is on achieving these sustainable goals that have been laid down by the UN in by way of UN Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda for 2030. Yeah. So why all buzz around? Suddenly there is a buzz around ESG globally and India also. I think one of the main important reason is growing concern ESG across globe. And then shifting from financial to non-financial parameters, reporting on these aspects, global supply chain commitment, since now globally companies and are implementing global supply chain frameworks where companies which forms part of the global supply chains are supposed to comply with ESG norms. So if you're supplying to companies in EU and other countries where there are framework, these frameworks now require you as a part of the supply chain to adhere to ESG norms. So if you're not complying to that ESG norms in some manner or in a longer term, you will lose to some extent the contracts of international companies. ESG funding is now a very famous phenomenon, because a lot of the companies are now investing on ESG parameters, who are companies who are only compliant in ESG. I'll discuss further. Like for example, ESG sustainable investing or sustainable investing itself a term which has been now becoming very relevant. Everyone is investing in themes which are ESG relevant, and in businesses which promote green energy, green technology. There are indices across the globe like Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, MSI, who have specific indices which tracks companies which are compliant on ESG parameters. Even in India, there are a lot of mutual funds who are actually working on ESG themes and investing only in companies which are ESG compliant. Recently, SEBI also floated a discussion paper where they have now warranted and asked mutual funds to highlight how they are coming to a conclusion that how the companies are compliant and what parameters they are using to check the compliance in terms of the ESG norms. So ESG in India are not, it's not a new topic. As sir mentioned, in 2011, just a decade back, the first times these voluntary principles were introduced. And since then, we are taking a steady journey towards the ESG norms, the latest being the substitution of BRR with the BRSR, a more comprehensive report where, apart from responsibility reporting on just business principles, reporting on aspects related to sustainability have now been also introduced as a part of BRSR. All these Indian regulatory framework on ESG is circling around all these 9 principles which were laid out by the voluntary guidelines or responsible business by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which talks about ethical and transparent operations, sustainable goods and services, employee well-being, respect interest of stakeholders, human rights, environment, responsible and transparent policy advocacy. So all these are part and parcel of the main ambit of where the entire ESG framework in India is being moving. And if you see, all these principles are actually mapped with all these sustainable development goals which have been issued by UN. So each principle to some extent have been mapped with the relevant sustainable goal to assert, making sure that these sustainable goals are achieved by way of reporting on all, complying with all these principles. What is the current framework? Currently, in terms of ESG, we have Factories Act, Environment Protection Act, Air and Water Pollution Act, hazardous waste management, plastic waste, and there are a lot of stuff which are forcing companies to take regulatory action in terms of their bit on environment. On social, we have Companies Act, which provides for CSR, labor laws. There are a lot of human rights laws like Human Trafficking, Sexual Harassment Act, which is their base is on human rights. And then on governance, basically we have Companies Act and SEBI LODR regulations, which outlines a governance framework for both unlisted and listed companies. So this is something which is a standard government framework which is being followed by companies in India, which followed by reporting in terms of BRR, CSR reporting, conservation, energy conservation related disclosures, which we are doing in the board report, environmental audit, and even the fiduciary duties on directors, put an onus on them to ensure sustainability operations, responsible business conduct. So while ESG is very important, but when it comes to ESG, there are 2 parts. One is part on execution, another part is on reporting. I think on the execution, Upendra will share his view how companies can actually implement ESG practices. On the वो ले लेना अपना डबल नहीं है वो है मैं देखता हूँ तो थोड़ा अभी चल गया ठीक है यही बैठ आवाज नहीं आ रही इनके ओके जस्ट अ सेकंड My apologies for the frequent disconnection in the net. Yes, again. So I was talking about international reporting framework. So these frameworks are there, and each of them outline their own standards. So the famous which are there is GRI, the most popular and the most widely used standard across globally by companies, which outlines various standards in 3 headings: economic, environment, and social. And these are the key topics under which is covered under each of these standards. And if you go through each of these topic, you will find they have outlined a series of checklist points in terms of whether you have complied this or not. If yes, you have to disclose. So this is the whole framework of GRI standards, and it is being most commonly used across countries and jurisdictions. Then integrated reporting framework, SEBI some time back has come out with a circular where certain classes of companies are allowed to use this framework for voluntary reporting. A lot of companies in India are actually reporting on international reporting framework. International reporting framework like GRI also has its own set of standards. Like it provides you disclosure on topics which they have converted in terms of capital, like financial capital, manufactured capital, intellectual capital, human capital, social and relationship capital, natural capital. So all these capital, while in terms they are capital, but in sum and substance, they relate to each and every aspect of ESG, which is being provided in the concept. Then there are other principles on UN principles, ISO 26000, Sustainability Accounting Standard Board. There are a lot of such organizations which have issued their own standards across globe. In India, GRI, for example, Infosys is publishing its own GRI report. Reliance, Unilever, ICICI Bank is publishing on international integrated reporting. Apollo Tyres is reporting on ISO 26000. All these companies, TCS, SDFC, Asian Paint, ITC, are also reporting on both integrated reporting framework and GRI. So the Indian companies are already following in this these disclosure norms in addition to the BRR. Now coming to BRR and SR, as we already know, BRR, top 1,000 companies are required to report on BRR based on 9 principles. Now BRSR is something which is extensive version of BRR, and from 2020 to 23 financial year. So the annual report for this year, next year, will consist of your reporting on business responsibility and sustainability report rather than on BRR. So what is BRR? BRR is why BRSR. Even SEBI, while issuing its notification or circular of May 2021, highlighted that climate change, focus on sustainability, reporting on non-sustainability related factors these are the some things which are now becoming important rather than only financial parameters, and therefore there is a need now to move to a wider zone of sustainability reporting. BRR versus BRSR. BRR continues to be on 9 principles, but the reporting has undergone massive transformation. Stress is now on quantitative disclosures rather than subjective expressions. If you see, the existing BRR report is very subjective. Most of times there are questions and you give subjective answers as to what you're doing. But now the entire subjective portion has been replaced by quantitative disclosure. So like, for example, how many employees, what kind of benefits you're giving, effluent data, energy consumption data, all these have now been to be provided in quantitative figures. So there cannot be just subjective expressions. Disclosures have been divided into 2 indicators, essential indicators and leadership indicators. Disclosures on essential indicators are mandatory. Leadership indicators are voluntary, but leadership indicators requires you to a higher degree of compliance on ESG. So if you are complying on those higher degrees, you tend to be in a leadership position in those principles, and you are doing more than what is generally being done by a normal company in ordinary course. So you are doing something more, and this shows that you are trying to be on a leadership position in not only letter, it also in spirit. Key disclosures, I just try to build in some key disclosures. So there are general disclosures is in terms of, now a company have to outline a statement in terms of business responsibility report as to what's the vision of the company towards business responsibility, the challenges they face, the targets and achievement they have set for them in the times to come, material responsible conduct with respect to the sustainability issues, the environmental and social risk that they foresee as a part of their business operations, and how the company will overcome these risks in times to come. These has to be disclosed as a part of the general disclosures. In terms of specific, some disclosures like fine penalties have now to be disclosed, number of employees, sustainability in terms of what proportion of inputs are you being sourced sustainably. Sustainably sourcing here means that the vendors from which you are procuring your goods, whether are they complying with ESG norms or not, what kind of investment you are doing in technology to ensure limited impact of environment and social of your products. Extended producer responsibility norms, if you're applicable to you, extended producer responsibility norms are norms where there is a responsibility being put on the producer to minimize the impact of the goods post its consumption. Like for example, plastic waste, mobile phones, electronic gadgets, once they become outdated, how they will dispose of. So waste management of that. So there are laws in India which extend such kind of responsibility on producers. Employee well-being, huge data is being asked in terms of what measures you are taking for well-being, retirement benefits in terms of quantitative figures, whether your organization is accessible in terms of differently able, can you have made provision for them to easily access your office, equal opportunity policy, performance and career development reviews, health and safety management system, identifying key stakeholders, what you're doing in terms of are you entering into regular dialogues with your key stakeholders to understand their issues vis-a-vis your company's operation, human rights, whether you're giving training on human rights, details of minimum wages being paid, whether you have a human right grievance officer in your company, whether human rights as a policy is being also forced upon your vendors. Environment, this is one of the major topic where you are now required to give great quantitative data in terms of how much energy you are consuming, energy consumption is in terms of your revenue, water consumption, waste management, how much waste you're generating, how you're recycling, in terms of policies, environmental clearances that you're taking. If you are working near to, for example, wildlife sanctuaries or some areas which are biodiversity protected, what kind of extra efforts as a company you are taking, in details about your environmental impact assessment of your projects. All these are now required to be disclosed. Inclusive growth, social impact assessment. If your projects are subject to social impact assessment, you have to disclose the outcome of these assessments, projects rehabilitation, input material source from supplier, consumer value in terms of how your products are eco-friendly. If while during the production of your product, have you taken care of social and environmental risks that arise during the production course? In case you have recalled your products, details with respect to recalls, like a lot of automobile companies recall their cars. So now they have to disclose how many cars they have recalled during a year, corrective actions, how you are protecting data security, data privacy of your customers, how BSR will be a game changer. So now, because there will be a lot of quantitative data, it will present a picture in black and white. We cannot just write anything for just the purpose of giving a report. Peer comparison, since quantitative data will lead to clear peer comparison in terms of companies working in similar sectors. So therefore, they will be judged in terms of their ESG practice very easily. As I mentioned, window dressing, greenwashing of ESG practices won't be possible now, since you are required to give your quantitative data. Disclosures, since now you are required to give your disclosures and that would be subject to public scrutiny, you will be more, the companies will now have greater realization of their responsibility towards society, stakeholders, and they will be much more inclined towards compliance of ESG norms. How to prepare for BRSR? Short-term plan, I think, just for the purpose of reporting, decide the reporting framework, map data from your respective department, because since a lot of quantitative data has to be generated, so you have to map each data from the respective teams. Identify critical areas in the reporting framework where you are not doing good. So try to identify that these areas, if I report where I'm not taking immediate steps, then it will give a wrong signal or impression about the governance or framework about this company. So identify those areas and implement processes and systems in those particular areas. ESG is actually a long-term process. You cannot just achieve your ESG related norms or compliances in a short term. So a long-term project should be set up your ESG vision and goal and what you want to achieve by way of ESG. Develop an ESG framework. I think Upendra will share more about what an ESG framework should consist of. Assess your current status as to how far you are doing in terms of your current ESG compliances. Prioritize your key areas, because ESG framework itself is very big, very huge. Identify key areas in your ESG. For example, in environment, what currently need your priority, social, what currently need your priority, governance, and then frame, implement, and policies and practices around those key areas. Monitor and supervise, and then set reporting matrices and goals. Is just reporting through BRSR is enough to ESG compliant? BRSR or BRR are just a way to outline what you're doing in ESG. Reporting will never leads to compliance, but yes, once you start reporting, as I mentioned, you will realize the importance of the reporting, and simultaneously you will start beginning to represent or implement a BRR ESG related framework in your company, which automatically will lead to ESG compliant. A lot of companies ask us a question: we are into service sector, we are not into manufacturing, we don't do pollution, how we are concerned with ESG? So ESG is not only about companies which have direct role in pollution. Each company is in some way, whether it's which is not directly into manufacturing, in service sector, has a role to play towards doing it bit for the society and the environment. Like, for example, wastage of resources, waste water usage, how much water you are using as an organization, whether that is a need to use such huge quantum of water. Electricity, are we saving electricity, moving to LED framework? In terms of stakeholders, are we mapping them, doing some better towards them? Human rights, governance, all these are not only limited to a manufacturing company, it extends beyond manufacturing company to entire corporates which operates in the current regulatory framework. Just want to be a key impact on ESG Inc. So if you look into the international agencies net zero 250 report, it outlines what you need to do as a country or as an organization to achieve the goals of ESG or net zero emission. It's from shift to fossil to non-fossil fuels, energy efficient solutions for your business, retrofitting of buildings to zero carbon labels, emission control, reduce mobility. All these, while a lot of steps out of these will be taken by government, but each corporate has to play its role, because if you see, out of all these 5 points, each and every some or one point are linked to your operations. So when government will be doing its in its way to achieve net zero emission, reduce compliance on fossil forms, moving to non-fossil forms, non-renewable energy, then while they will only outline policy, actual implementation has to come from the corporates, because we are the actual ones. So therefore, we need to understand the magnitude of and importance of ESG in times to come, because the next decade will be all about ESG as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankit, for giving in a very short and crisp presentation. No doubt this concept is very big, and to understand this, it will take time, but very nicely covered. Now, I will request Andrag Goel sir. Sir, you are doing this work since long, and you are always advocating on sustainability. And you are always saying, if you are doing governance, if you are doing anything, it should be sustainable. It should not be just on the tick box. But sir, keeping in mind the so many aspects of the governance or ESG and the sustainability and so many issues which are there, what is the impact of exponential technologies on ESG metrics, and how these things can be simplified so the people in the corporate should adopt easily, not the cumbersome? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pawan. It's a pleasure. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And as usual, I mentioned to Pawan, and he knows me very well, that I won't be speaking much on the key discussion points. And I now realize that it's very wise of you to have done that, because Ankit has more than adequately covered the entire lot of things. And I have absolutely no doubt that Mr. Upendra Bhatt will bring the vision of and the approach and the mindset of a entrepreneur, professional, and a top-level leader. You mentioned sustainability. In fact, like what Ankit was talking about, SDGs. At one stage, I was strongly tempted to use the SDG framework, and I'll share the reason with you. You know, in the entire world, at that time when SDGs came, I was advising government of ASEAN. I'm talking the last quarter of 2015. So when this resolution was taken on 24th September 2015, I told the chief secretary that this is the next big thing, let's work on it. And I made the first model and the architecture for implementation of SDGs in the entire world. And I'm telling you why I can say with the entire world. Because without our trying, and I got the state government to issue orders in December, but because without our realizing, this document reached not only the UN headquarters, the vision we prepared was handed over to the UN Secretary General. And they were so impressed, they told Chief Minister of Assam that you are leading the world, mind you, not India. You're leading the world in SDGs. So as a follow-up, lots of things happened apart from the fact that I was made advisor to UNDP at their request for 3 years on SDGs. So SDGs were very close to my heart. But what happened when I was getting all this implemented, not only in Assam, but in various states, I realized something very, very peculiar, which surprised me. See, this is SDG 2030. So you would expect people to look at 2030, but what I found, nobody looked even at 2020. They were doing what they were doing. And when I started talking of what could, if you looked at the future and started thinking from there, I found that people just couldn't grasp what is happening. So slowly my focus, I said that the SDGs, a lot of people know about. The area in India, and I'm talking of India, both for the government and for the corporate sector and others, civil society included. Somehow this whole idea of a futurist mindset and using the tools what are called strategic foresight, that didn't happen in India. That hasn't still happened, but last 6 years that has been my focus. So that being my primary interest, what happens is when I look at anything, I look at it, I'm sitting in the future. I look at anything from the future and see what is happening, let's say in 2025 or 2030. And then look at what's happening today. And then try to see what kind of journey it's likely to be and what are the opportunities, what are the threats. You know, that is the whole point of this whole exercise. So as I talk to you, in a sense, I talk to you from the future. In fact, my request is, since I am sitting in the future, would you please set aside your own normal approach and join me in the future? And let us together try to look at ESG issues from the vantage point of where technology would have taken the world by then. Okay, that's my confession to begin with. Let me come to the subject. And what I find is, some people think E is more important, some people think S is more important, some people think G is more important, etc., etc. But in the real world, most people are looking for M. And we all know M stands for money. So even when you talk of ESG and you see the various definitions, what do people say? Investors are increasingly applying these non-financial factors as part of the analysis process to identify material risks and growth opportunities. So you know, at the bottom of ESG, of course, we are all very conscious. We want to save the planet. We want to save this, that, and the other. But I think the driving force of money is great. And since the pressure is for investors, they have to respond to consumer demand. Now, let me in this framework, let me start by looking at E. But I look at everything from a technology perspective, as Pawan has said. I look at it from a technology perspective. Ankit mentions EVs, and all of you have heard, there's a lot of buzz about it. We are all waiting. In fact, many of us, I'm not buying my second car because waiting for it to come, so are many others. And those who are more into the analysis, they start questions of batteries, storage capacity, carbon footprint, cost, etc. And the good thing is, as in India, here together, we are discussing all these things. There are some very smart and rich people in US and other places who are busy putting their money on finding solutions for E in general. And EV is a very in thing. It's a very in thing. And you know what? if they find the solutions for EV and batteries, you run into the huge issue of infrastructure for charging, and we are already talking of it in India also. And guess again, when the US manages to do that, it finds that the power infrastructure in US which is already in a bad shape, just cannot meet the demand. Because naturally the demand will zoom once you are using EVs. So which means then you have to introduce and produce renewable energy at a mammoth scale. So in brief, the point I want to make, that there's so much buzz on EV, but the world is actually not ready for EV. That is what I think, as rationally anybody would think. But investors believe US is leading, but there are many others, that EVs are the future. So there are a lot of these extremely smart, extremely rich people investing incredible amount of money to chase EV related issues. You know, they think it's a gold rush. First oil strike hai, first gold rush hai, Wild West pe, whoever gets in first makes it. So it's a huge thing. And so much money chasing all these things. And I'll give you an example to illustrate. Some of you might have heard of this Rivian. Now, Rivian is an American electric vehicle automaker, an innovative technology automotive technology company. It was founded in 2009. It's building an electric SUV and pickup truck on what they're calling skateboard platform. They can use it, somebody else can also use it. And these are being designed both for online and offline purposes. Electric van is also being built. And all these are slated to be delivered in near future. So far, not a single vehicle has been delivered. And of course, they plan to have an exclusive charging network in US and Canada. Now, what happens to this? This company goes to NASDAQ. And I can see Mr. Bhatt is already nodding, yes, that has happened on 10th November with an offer price of $78. On the first trading day, it closed at $100.73 per share and with a market value of just under $100 billion. Now, the point I want to make, and this applies to a lot of these E things, out of ESG, the real money you'll find will be chasing E. SNG, at the moment, really people look at it almost as a regulatory thing. I'll come to why it's not regulatory. I'll come to why it's an existential issue. People don't realize it. That's the purpose of what I'm going to say. But this is a lot of money in E, that's why I picked it up. And you know, I have not even mentioned, you know what has happened as a result? This Rivian is ahead of Ford and GM in market capitalization. And it's only below Tesla. So that is the kind of value. But let me share very interesting. You see the financials of the company, and you are aware of it. Nike and all those things are happening in India also. What are the financials of the company? Revenue, $0 for fiscal year ending 31st December 2020. Wonderful. Operating income, minus $1.02 billion for the same period, only last year. So you see, this is where the interest in future and technology and E converge with each other. You know what? I was talking to an expert in US. You know, he said, you know, Maruti Udyog is already dead. Of course, so are many other automakers. And mind you, I have not so far even mentioned the self-driven aspect or the China-US rivalry or all that. So this is the kind of disruption, or not disruption will be bigger. You know what the disruption is going to be? The oil economy is going to be disrupted. So imagine what happens to Middle East. Then coal-based power infrastructure will also collapse once clean energy becomes so important. And what happens to banks with significant exposure to coal and power? So you see, this is not one thing, oil. So this is not one thing. What I'm trying to say, that everything is connected to everything else, and this E is going to have a lot of impact. Personally, I look at it, when I think of E, I'm basically thinking of clean tech. So if you think of clean tech, you would have covered a lot of this e-business. Well, let me come down to the S factor. What kind of impact technology may have on the framework of S? This S is, once Ankit showed the details, S is very deceptive in the shorter version, like in the brochure, but it is deceptive. And you've already explained in the brochure, and Ankit has explained. So let me use only two examples, not give any theory on this. Let us take two examples to understand. And I will share with you two plausible futures. You may think that these are not realistic, but I'll come to that if necessary. But these are two plausible future scenarios that can happen to the human race. And the kind of ethical issues companies and investors will face. You see, these are the ethical issues. A lot of it will come into S and G. I mean, you can take your choice whether it's S and G. A lot of it will come in here. Now, first example, singularity. Define by many as the moment when AI will finally eclipse human intelligence. You have seen all those science fiction movies and Matrix and whatever. But, singularity is going to come. You can't stop it. As people argue it's 2038 or this or that. I'll not go into that. But as we approach singularity, not even when we reach there, it's already happening. AI, as people call it, impact of AI. The nature of work is changing. Huge loss of jobs is there. Lot of factors of various diversity, welfare, health, a lot of issues that you talk in AS. Now, what happens to millions of people who lose jobs? What happens to when technology doesn't allow those employees to be there? People talk of reskilling, but when you go into detail, reskilling would be a small proportion. As far as I know, S doesn't currently really look into it. It implies. It implies, but it doesn't look into it. So that is something that this will come. This will come, I have no doubt. But what worries me much more? This is okay. This will be a deal. What worries me is the larger social impact on the society itself. And please, let me just quote for you an article I read only yesterday. This is the December 2021. That's the next month's publication of the magazine, The Atlantic. It is titled, "The Singularity is Here." And I will not get onto that. I can explain that also. But it says, artificial intelligence advertising technology is poisoning our society. Please note these words, advertising technology. I'll try to, it's a very complex thing, but I'll try to explain what he has said in a 4 or 5 page article. He says that EdTech technology is no longer just shaping the world around us, but actively remaking us from within. It is changing us from within. It is not just ads coming and you buy. And he explains in detail the impact of current data-hungry advertising on shaping our very personality and decisions. You know what this article reminded me of? First, of course, the controversy around Cambridge Analytica, Brexit, US 2016 election, presidential election. Also, when I go to Amazon or Netflix or YouTube, the way it guides me to the next one, and all that. But what he says is that this is not accidental. This is all designed, and you will find there are ways in which you will spend more and more time, and people can't keep away from the screens anymore. Whether it's meeting, whether it's anything, they must see the screen. But the design is by deliberately that you spend more and more time on the screen. And the more time you spend, the more data they get. And the more data they get, the more they can manipulate you. And in between, this is something I had never heard of before till yesterday. There are subliminal messages which you don't realize are registering, which change you from inside. And that reminded me of what Yuval Noah Harari, the globally acclaimed historian, futurist, says, those who control the data will control the world in the future, which is, of course, the future version of the catchphrase, data is the new oil. Now, why I'm saying all this is that once those, and I would suggest corporate professional looks at it, because I have known corporate professionals since I was secretary. So I'm not corporate professional, known Pawan and then corporate professional. So let's say 15 years now. And he's one of those people who are ahead of his times. He looks at the future. He discusses the future with me. He has a lot of idea. I think you need to bring out these major dimensions of S and G. E will take care of itself. I'm not worried about it. The major dimensions of S and G, if you're changing the society from within, what are you going to do? And this is not a dystopian storytelling piece. Don't think that I'm just telling some dystopian thing. You have already seen the impact of social media, and most of you would have seen that Facebook has now been renamed as Meta platform, and do look at what is metaverse. There isn't enough time, but if you were to go into this, you'll realize that this impact is far, far more than you are thinking or we are thinking. And fortunately, I'm currently advisor to IIT Jodhpur, and only a fortnight ago, I convinced the director, IIT Jodhpur, a professor of psychology, and another professor of anthropology to take up research in these areas. So what I'm saying is serious. I mean, an IIT doesn't take up research unless there's enough evidence. So that is one area. The other area is transhumans. It's even more science fiction. I know, आप में से बहुत लोग कहेंगे कि Mr. Goel is talking science fiction. It was science fiction at one time, but the future is here, believe you me. Now, in medical science, there are huge advances. You have heard of biotech, CRISPR, cloning, moonshots of lung biotechnology and all that. People say that 100 will be the new 60. I'm not even talking of that. What is happening is, from a social point of view, biohacking. Biohacking is you can modify the human body and mind with machine interface. The machine interface with nerves, machine interface with muscles, machine interface with brain implants and all that kind of thing. And you will have a different breed of human beings. That's what they call transhumans. Now, imagine what are we doing to the race? Now, that will take, of course, not this decade. So don't have to worry this decade. But Ankit is young. Pawan Vijay is also fairly young, not that much. I have no worries on that count. You know, my children and grandchildren, I'm not be around. And I'll not be in the age when 100 is the new 60. I would be in the old 70, 80, whatever. So, if we look at these things and start thinking, then it would start making sense. Now, let me quickly come to G factor. And I like this word. Each director of the company, as well as the board as a whole, has the responsibility of acting in the best interest of the company and its various stakeholders now. That's true. And I've seen the whole list of things which are there. But the one thing which I did not find, and Ankit, please correct me if I'm wrong, and which is that the board's first responsibility is to see the future, to visualize the future, to prepare the company for the future. You know what is the paradox today? Paradox today, and that is what I hope Mr. Bhatt will talk about, because he's facing that. These exponential technologies are, what they're doing is, they are providing huge opportunities along with existential threats. So either you prosper or you perish. Many of them, not everything. I mean, I'm sure my Panwala will continue to be as good. You know, you look at what happened to Kodakville, what happened to Kali Pili, what happened to so many other. Even when e-commerce came, which is a much lower level of disruption, So you see what kind of thing could happen. So in fact, this is why over the last 1 year, and Pawan, I don't know whether I mentioned it to you or not, over the last 1 year, I have been invited to give talks to hundreds of boards, chairmen, directors, CEOs on the very specific subject of strategic foresight for building sustainable business. And obviously, your business being sustainable. I'm not talking this sustainability in terms of SDG. I'm talking of having a business which is self-sustainable. And for that, the idea was that I should tell them about strategic foresight, which is what? Which basically is a tool, a very highly complex and effective tool, but basically a tool which uses AI and analytics to help you in visualizing alternate plausible futures. So you see what it does, beautiful thing. It can be quite addictive actually. Hard work. You place before the board, these are the 5 plausible futures. Probability differs, but and the board says, I want this one. Or they give their own. Then you go through backcasting to develop the right kind of strategy. This is the future focused strategy. Now, those who don't do that, I'm afraid many of them may suffer, not all of them. Let me give you an example. Sorry. There are a lot of people in manufacturing. I don't know how many of them realize that within this decade itself, 3D printing may disrupt their business, as also related businesses in supply chains, and you mentioned that, transportation, warehousing, etc. So each technology you take, and there are at least 25 such technologies, cause disruption. And I was talking to the entire top brass of LIC, Life Insurance Corporation, is invited to chairman and MD's top brass. And I talked to them about the developments in the area of longevity, about what would impact them in this decade, the concept of escape velocity and death is a disease. No, I don't want to explain them. Try to understand death is a disease concept. And what is going to happen, that there will be less and less death, at least for the rich. The huge amount of money will be required. So, but the rich can afford that. And that ultimately cost will come down. So one can, of course, take a view that my industry and my sector, or my company, we are safe, the future is not going to affect us. You're quite welcome to do that. Nokia thought that, so did Kodak, so just so many others. So you're quite welcome. In fact, you'll be in the very good company, such people, of one dean of an IIM, where I was senior fellow, a senior guy, highly respected. So I made the mistake of discussing some of these things with him. And he looked at me very patronizingly and he told me pearls of wisdom. He says, Mr. Goyal, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So you have your choice. So this is actually the backdrop in which I think he should be looked at. And so that I think probably overshot the time, but I don't want to go into it. This was illustrative. What I have said is very, very illustrative, just to make the point, the impact of exponentials on ESG. Now, mind you, I'm not saying ESG will change. The basic principles will remain the same. But the scale, the parameters, the criteria, a whole lot of things will change within the same principles. For I don't know how many of you have gone to this, what was Facebook's impact in, I think it was Africa. It led to more hatred, violence, all sorts of things. And this is this article that I mentioned. It says all this is deliberate. So I'll leave it at that. And let me now circle back to where I started. Well, I started by talking about investment, because ultimately it's all about ESG. The basic is investor wanted. So I'm presently working on a business strategy for a portfolio management service in this background. The idea is to make long-term investments using foresight-based insights into what kind of future of business and different sectors is going to be, and which companies are likely to succeed or perish. Now, it's early days. It took a lot of effort, a lot of expertise. But once I'm able to establish a clear, credible loop, which includes today's investors and future world and consumers, we will have a powerful tool to attract and guide investments. The PMS can use it for investing in capital markets, while the companies can use it for getting investors. I call it my foresight and AI-driven ESG plus investment strategy. You can see I actually give a lot of weight to ESG. So even my strategy is a ESG plus strategy. Well, so that is, I think that is about all that I want to say. And I think ESG is very important, continue to do so. It will shape, change, factors may change. But I don't think, I have no idea how many of you believe me. I would be very surprised if many in the audience believe what I'm saying. I'd be very surprised. But my idea was to make believe in what I'm saying. My idea is very simple. The objective I set for myself and Pawan, I had some other commitments, so I said, Pawan, additionally, I'm not able to go. But anyway, so the objective simply, is it possible? Would I succeed in provoking at least 1/3 or half of the people to think? And think not only fleetingly, because we are an instant gratification society now, but think deeply. Think deeply, not so much of ourselves, think deeply of our children. Think what's happening to where we live. Think. Now, if you think deeply, that is all I'm saying. I'm not at all saying that you take as even a single word of what I've said as correct, true, gospel or anything. But please do think, because on my part, I'm absolutely sure that 5 years later, if corporate professionals organize a workshop, that would be, of course, in the immersive media mode with VR and all that kind of stuff. But if they do so, many of these issues will be included in the key discussion points. Of course, Pawan, if I'm around and you invite me, then I'll have some other discussion point. I'll not speak about them. Well, gentlemen, you have been very patient. I enjoyed my time with you. And sorry, I won't be there for questions, but if they can be sent to me through corporate profession, I'll answer. And I'll stay on as long as I can, because I'm very, very keen to hear Mr. Bhatt. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I know Mr. Bhatt will discuss, but I just want to ask one question, because you were in the government, so you must be instrumental to discuss this issue. The point is very clear, sir. Today, what is happening, if you see all these development which has taken place of transformation or mechanization or machinerization or converting into, you are building roads. So other countries, they don't have population. So that's why they invented machines. But our country is following, which has a population. So what is the thought of government? Is there any plan, any discussion has taken place in the country, in the world, in the government, that the country which has more populous country should have different view on these things? Today you are going to Chandigarh, you will find 3 bridges which are pending since last 10 years. I'm worried, I'm disturbed, I'm disgusted. But if I came to know that this bridge is making, but this bridge is making by 10,000 people, and that will take normal time to 6 months to it will take 3 years. Sir, I will be happily contribute, because by my sacrifice or this convenience, 10,000 people family will run. What is a policy? This is the short question I'm asking, sir. Then I'll request Upendra to discuss.
Okay, Pawan, thanks for the question. Firstly, just to say what the question, the example of the bridge, way back in 1988, when I was for a year in Canada for some in-service course, the example of Tanzania was given in exactly the same. Half the road was constructed by highly mechanized US company and half by Chinese, which was labor intensive. But I would first say, please, I have no clue and I'm nobody to say on what is the government thinking or discussing. I left, I did my job. I left in 2009. Competition Commission was not government. Competition Commission was a regulator. But my job as Secretary Corporate Affairs, my job as ex officio member of SEBI board, which of course I was there for 3.5 years also in SEBI board, all that was over. So I will not comment on government shares, but I'll come back to the key issue. See, I will answer only your Gita quote with what Mahatma Buddha used to say. The golden mean. And India actually is the right country. It has all the resources, brains, and situation to find that golden mean. How to manage the two. But the point is, you need both, you know. You need to have a process, and I don't want to go detail. You need to set up a process for that. These things don't happen by themselves. I'm helping IIT Jodhpur to create the vision and of the next generation IIT. And Jodhpur is new, but it's absolutely the kind of process one has had to set up, the kind of problems one is running into, and that's a very small thing. So, Pawan, the short answer is yes. In essence, your question concern all right. Yes, all decision makers, not only in government, corporates, elsewhere, everybody should look at it. But for that, somebody will have to set up a process. Corporate professionals can always take lead in preparing a base paper. Thank you. And thank you again for inviting me.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. So now I will request Upendra Bhatt. He is co-founder and MD of C Kinetics. Last 25 years, these people are working exclusively in ESG. They are doing assessment. They are doing how to do the reporting and how the ESG framework is there and how to make it. I met him, Mr. Bhatt, in his office. The way they have prepared the entire process, it is mind-boggling. And the way SEBI and other people are coming out, and the government and the individual basis investors are coming out, it is now will not be just compliance. It is the part of your life, part of the corporate world. So over to you, Upendra. Please tell us about your experience and how this journey will take over.
Sure. Thank you. Ankit, maybe I can share the screen. I'm not sure whether you got the right version.
Yeah,
I think Rekha may have sent just a little while back. Is it?
Okay, I think this is the right one.
I don't know. I would only know.
Yeah, this was the last file I received.
But doesn't matter. But thank you for inviting me, for sharing based on our work and what we think of the space. But before I go there, when you raised this question, which that you addressed to Mr. Goyal, which was primarily around technology versus livelihoods and the implication. And I think, frankly, this is a misplaced, notion, because if you remember 15, 20 years back, as computerization of banks happened, everybody thought you'll lose jobs. Today, that has been a great enabler because you had people who understood banking, and now you have technology, so you could do IT-enabled services and created maybe 10x the jobs than you had at that point. It certainly creates short-term disruption. It may also lead to situations where individual companies or individual projects may have lesser people. But if applied appropriately, and that goes to the point Mr. Goyal was making around processes and strategic vision behind this, it can be a great enabler. You talked about our ESG tool, Pawan. Frankly, if technology didn't exist, it may have ended up being a burden to even implement that when we are going to our clients. So I think technology is a great enabler. We should embrace it, but we need to be smart about us being the masters of the tool and not tools being the master of us. And I think that is really the essence. But shifting gears, going back to the reason why you invited me, maybe we can just go to the next slide. You're short of time. So really, I think a lot of this has been touched upon by previous speakers. It is becoming an increasing tool for sustainability agenda, both at the corporate level and at an investor level or a financier level. Ankit talked about the definition of sustainability, which is about creating a harmonious equilibrium between our current needs and going forward. But all of this boils down to really looking at ESG drivers, which are about how do you manage your operational risk? How do you kind of coexist with the communities where you are? So you have a social license to operate. How does that impact your brand reputation? Even leading brands like Nike, going back to early days of ESG being a frame, Nike had a large operation in Indonesia where you ran into some labor issues. And consequently, the large pension funds holding Nike stock walked out of Nike at that point. And it created the first big momentum in the textile apparel footwear space for ESG in those days, and the term now is socially and responsible investing. So you keep on coming with new labels, but principally it's about how do you protect risk? How do you protect reputation? How do you use this to guide your own performance? And there may be questions because typically when a compliance comes out or reporting comes out, people start looking at it as a cost, as a burden. And a part of it is true because different organizations have different capacities. But I think ESG accords an immense opportunity to differentiate your products, your business model. Some of the opportunities that you may not have thought about will start surfacing as a result of this. You will see an opportunity for picking up best practices in your facilities, not because you originally thought them to be relevant, but now because because we start reverting or responding to data that we see. That is human behavior. Human tendency is what we can't measure, we don't act upon. But what we measure and track slowly and surely, forces its way into our thinking, irrespective of how reluctant we are to act on it. That's how, so when we are now moving towards a very quantifiable and objective-based reporting systems, as Pawan mentioned, with the implementation of the BRSR, which today, incidentally, is mandatory only for top 1,000. But my belief is before the end of this decade, and maybe much sooner, it will become mandatory in some form for everybody. There may be some elements of proportionality depending on turnovers of the firms, etc. But it will become mandatory, and more so if you start looking for external credit rating, if you start looking for large-scale banking finance, etc. So I think this is not something which is going to be just a simple reporting framework that we need to look at. And we'll talk about some of the BRSR elements and what it means or doesn't mean, but that's one part. I think the other part is the access to capital is going to get moderated by how people's views on your ESG framework and performances. And Ankit touched about sustainability themed investing. You see pricing differentials because you are seen as a better performer. There is data to say that people who have been doing well on ESG have typically performed well, even financially. There is good correlation and academic data there. Can we just move on? I would not go on many things that because Ankit has already touched upon it, but really the essence of the BRSR is across three buckets. The general disclosures, of course, touch upon a wide spectrum of things. Management and process really looks at the maturity of the organization itself in terms of articulation of its policies, its visions, what kind of elements exist, how would you go about measuring, tracking. So it's a good framework or reflection of what is needed, when, where, how do you future-proof it, etc. But the most critical is this quantifiable objective mechanism where you need to disclose about your performance. And it is really cuts across two groups of indicators, the mandatory ones and the voluntary ones where you are deemed to kind of lead the thinking and be a thought leader. And what we see is you need to start now looking at environmental impact assessment and social impact assessment in a formidable fashion. You would need to report on your scope 1 and 2. Scope 1 is all the footprint as it exists to your plants and operations in-house within the boundary walls of your various facilities, etc. Scope 2 is any purchased electricity, steam, energy mechanisms. Scope 3 is your supply chain. So that is still voluntary, but all of you who are involved in global supply chains, I'm sure have already started, particularly in 4 or 5 key export sectors, have started seeing a lot of requests around such performance measures and metrics, and how are you doing? So in that sense, a framework from SEBI actually is a tool, in my view, to harmonize such a reporting back, because now you have a structured framework in which you can present your information. You would also get a sense of how others are presenting it. BRSR needs a little bit of upliftment on certain things. They are going to come up with sector specific guidances in certain sectors to make it a little bit more easier for people to assess and apply. But it is that in that backdrop that we need to see this, that we, rather than see it as a compliance thrust, we see this as an opportunity. Yes, there'll be a little bit of pain and effort required, but I think there's significant knowledge and expertise available to help guide that process. Maybe go on to the next one. Okay. So how do you really design an ESG strategy and a governance philosophy? I think it all starts by defining what is your own vision and goals. How do you see your company on these facets? How does this link into your decision making? From that, you end up formulating procedures and systems, performance management, and how do you kind of create a self-fulfilling positive loop mechanism. When you kind of define sustainability vision, procedures, and systems, you actually build it off mapping the environment and social issues that are relevant to you. There is, and how do you craft a large laundry list of parameters and KPIs? I think if one looks at BRSR, I think just the E&S itself is 1,000+ data points. So it's a very, very formidable structure. People may take a few years to get there, and demonstrate the maturity across each. But some of the larger companies are already there because they've been reporting into global frameworks, etc. The second is it allows you to kind of look at industry benchmarks and what the associated mandates are, what is the track. So if you look at India's own carbon commitments as we are making them for a low carbon trajectory, there is going to be a derived variant of that coming onto you. So a lot of the large corporates are already committing to 100% renewable electricity by the end of the decade. Now, how do you do that if you are part of such a company? You obviously cannot be sleeping till 2029. You need to have a mechanism on which how you're reporting it, how you're framing it. Let's say you also have a refined PAT comes in with a carbon credit mechanism, which says that anybody who's lowering by 40% intensity is going to be, benefited through interest subsidies from the government, let's say. So again, you need measurement systems. You need to decide what is material to you, etc. So this is really the broad area how you go about it. Ankit, could you just go on to the next one, please? And this really then feeds into how do you gauge this from a risk dimension as well? Because if you remember a couple of slides back, I talked about how do you manage operational risk? Because if you're, let's say, a water intensive company, you're a dyeing company, in textile dyeing, and you're in a water stressed area, surely you will be come under compliance limitations. You already have zero liquid discharge mandates in some clusters in India. If you go to Tirupur, so you have to graduate to that level. So there is a risk exposure. And if you proactively have that mechanism, you're able to talk to your stakeholders how you have already addressed that challenge, even while you're operating in that area. If you take the case of use of biomass in NCR industries, you are actually prohibited going forward. There is some fine print there. So how do you kind of look at such mechanisms? How do you decide what is material to you? How is the risk? How is it risky for you? What kind of risk management efforts you need to do? Because all of this put together, building of your first set of input data, which is your current level of reporting, disclosures, etc., and the government mandates, you are able to formulate the point of arrival for framing an ESG strategy. And then you kind of go from there. Because otherwise, when you're reporting into it at the end of the year, you would not have a very formidable mechanism on how you go about doing it. Maybe the next one, please. So this is what we do broadly. No, I think this is the previous version, Ankit. So give me a second if I can share. Ankit, give me 1 second. Can I just share this now, Ankit, from mine?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Upendra, you have a right, you can share.
Yes. Can you all see my screen, guys?
Yeah, this right.
Right. So you kind of start with looking at different business lines, different product verticals, because let's say you are a diversified company, your auto business may be very different than your textile business. And therefore, you kind of first break it down. You look at it from a sector point of view, look at it from a geographical point of view. So you end up, kind of decomposing your E, S, and G risks across each business line. And then you consolidate the assessments, across each. And that is how you first kind of come up with an issue list. Maybe go to the next one, please.
I think it's in your control now.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. This is what happens. So if you look at it, the E pillars really are around environmental standards. When Mr. Goel was talking about it, he said that is what is driving a lot of interest and engagement. True today, but when the first ESG funds came in India, primarily the focus was on G. And it was because you saw that a good governance company will have better appreciation for E&S, emerging E&S issues and emerging E&S mandates. So I think all three pillars are equally important. E is the least understood, and not because people don't understand the issues, just that you do not have enough tracking mechanisms and capacity to look at it and set goals and set metrics and decompose it, etc. So that is why it becomes a little bit more arbitrary. S is depending on how well you have been governing your human resource policies and frameworks. Different companies are in different levels of maturity to disclose it. It is not that they're not aware of what they need to do, nor is it that they don't have the data. It is just that sometimes the data may not be necessarily the ones that you want to put in the public domain. And I think the time has run out for people to hide from that data. And therefore, all three pillars become extremely critical around what you need to do. So what we do really is you can start with a pre-assessment and then move towards an interview and a discussion-based frameworks on assessments. Depending on the size of the company, this can be simplified, and the sector in which they're operating. Like Ankit said, some of the people feel we are in services industries, we don't need it. I think everybody needs it. It's just a question of level of applicability. And then you come up with what your profile looks like, what the corrective actions are, how do you enable implementation, and how do you kind of go forward with this. So how we do about this is, we kind of have a materiality map for each sector or each industry vertical and an issue list and a sub-issue list where these things become relevant. So you, even as a diversified company, not every issue may be relevant to each business. At the same time, the corollary is that for the businesses it is relevant to, one would need to put in more effort and ensure that. We don't have the time to do a demo of the tool that you normally use, but it's a very I've just taken out some extracts from that. You have a very defined set of parameters, key performance indicators, the methodologies for reporting against those indicators, and for several of the industries, what are the best practices so that one can build it out. And methodologies on how you can really report back, how you can calculate numbers, or how you can apply those practices, etc. And you also are able to come up with your own mechanism or even a self-scoring, if need be, of how you perform against mandatory dimensions and voluntary dimensions. You could tweak it and customize it to just the BRSR, which is the report of instant implication for all Indian companies, but you could also use this to harmonize it to any other global reporting standards, be it GRI, be it IR, be it CDP, etc. These are some of the snapshots of what we end up doing. Applying it, as you can see, the material issues can go, and beyond the material issues, you end up having performance categories and parameters. So GHG emission could be a material issue. You see on what businesses is it applicable. On performance categories, you apply what parameters is it applicable, etc., etc. And we also highlight what are must to have and nice to have, which is in a way corresponding to what BRSR is talking about as mandatory and leadership. except that this is customized and it is, made very sector specific. In addition, as part of the ESG framework, what we do for people keen on this is to come up with a mechanism where they can start tracking their own performance. That, how do I fare? These are just illustrative shots and illustrative numbers, but this is how you kind of go about looking at it across each parameter. Ankit talked about SDGs. If I look at it in the context of India and the Indian industry at large, I think the most relevant SDGs are 3, 5, 6, 12, and 13. 6 actually predates Swachh Bharat, but it's a lot in which a lot of CSR work is being done. And similarly, so you kind of have these SDG pillars, which I think accord an opportunity for companies to see how they are performing as part of a larger contribution beyond just reporting. I think let me stop there, Ankit, and because I think you're on time, short of time, so we can take some questions if you want, and that accords the audience the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Upendra. The way you have shown few slides, but these slides reflect how much extensive work you have done. I was just reading this representation: disabled as total workforce, performer 4%, achiever 4%, 5%, inspirer. Now, and then women is 30, 40, and 50 you have given. So it means you have given a practical exposure, practical aspects of these things. I think you're doing human service to the society, because now this particular work is not only confined to few companies, and you are perfectly right, it will applicable to each and every business. Even when we are traveling on the road and some car is producing more black pollution or black thing, you are stopping them, you are telling them that you are doing the wrong thing. So now this is a time, because E is not confined to big or small business. E is confined to each and every business. Social is also confined to the scale. Governance is no doubt, those who govern better, they will get better result. But these are the two things should be compulsory. I'm happy that today you have given very nice introduction of these things. And I hope that the way I'm next presenting the next slides, which will be, we want to, for the benefit of all the participants and all the public, we are doing the tie-up with the C Kinetics, and we want to do joint work with them, and we want to start this ESG practice in partnership with C Kinetics. And what we want to propose in this, that we will do the assessment, reporting, ESG framework, and then investment, and which is one of the part. And we will take advantage of the help of Upendra team and the C Kinetics. So you can see the assessment, reporting, and ESG framework is there, and we will do joint work on this. We will take advantage of their knowledge on ENS, and we will help and do this for governance point of view. And ultimately, these three things, when we will do, the investment advisory will also be required, that what you do. Andrag sir just now told that PMS, the mutual fund, those who are exclusive ESG mutual fund. So same thing they are also doing. They are starting PMS services and advising them. We are helping that company who is coming out with PMS, that these people will invest money in the futuristic companies, though will bring out something different. So friends, this way, I hope that corporate professional along with C Kinetics will bring these simplified things. And I was talking to Ankit, they have done extremely good job, C Kinetics. We will try to use the technology in this, and we'll bring out a best model for the help of the corporate world, where they can use this as a tool, very easy and accessible and effective, where assessment can also be there. There will be impact or assessment will also be there. And then how to report to the regulatory body, That is also there, because sometimes what is happening, you are reporting to somebody, but you are not making the practical aspect that how the reporting is measured by its performance. So we want to create that type of things with the help of C Kinetics, and we will present shortly a model for the corporate India for doing this. I'm very happy, Upendra, if you can say few words on this aspect, then I will take up some questions which we have received.
No, certainly. And in fact, a couple of questions that I'm seeing overlap with what you're asking me to respond to, Pavanji. As you rightly said, I think, I touched upon it, that there is always going to be an element of proportionality that one would need to bring in while responding to such mandates, because what will work for a large group like Tata is not necessarily relevant for someone whose turnover is 1,000 crores or 500 crores. So one would need to bring that in. So as a result of our experience over a decade now with this, both in India and internationally, we have an online tool, which is, and I think there was a question on that. It's an in-house tool that we have created. It allows you to harmonize not just in context of what was BRR and now BRSR, but also a lot of the global frameworks, and including things like Dow Jones Sustainability Index requirements or MSCI, which is where a lot of the ESG funds draw their inspiration from. So that is one mechanism. The tool obviously does not allow assurance processes to happen. Assurance obviously would require a validation, and that's where a lot of the product formulation that we are doing with the corporate professionals team will come into play, and what is a mechanism for a mid-sized company versus a large company, etc. And then, of course, because that has been bread and butter for C Kinetics for a long time, is our ability to help not just implement, but course correct and enable, better performance, and more critically, allow you to engage with your key stakeholders, be it your buyers, be it your investors, be it your, bankers, etc. In terms of, there was a question I see related to the ability of ESG to help on the financial aspects, not just, and I think moment credit rating becomes an integrated outlook, not just on your financial things, but also looking at ENS frameworks, whether it comes part of the same rating or it is a complementary rating, you will already see responses to that effect. And therefore, ESG clearly is not just about a good to have. It is a must-have outlook, in my view, for all firms, at their own peril, frankly, at some level. Many firms don't necessarily need to do anything more than what they are doing physically, except perhaps structuring their processes and systems to appropriately respond back. And that is where our tool and our other product-related services come in handy. And if corporate professional teams want, my teams could run some training webinars on that to show how that is being done. There's a very comprehensive platform which allows you, and one can have customized reports that get published as a result of that, and one can then build off that. And
okay, Upendra, one person is asking which online tool is being used by C Kinetics.
Like I said, we have designed our own tool for this. Because none of the online tools accord you the flexibility that we wanted to bring in, by both allowing you a self-help opportunity where firms could actually start using variants of the tool on their own to report it, because several large companies say that I have large EHS teams. I just want to make sure that my parameters are harmonized. So let's say CDP asks you for something GHG. The same data point may be asked in BRSR. Same data point, but the indicator numbers are different, the formats are different, etc. So what the tool does is it accords you that opportunity, tells you, okay, if you have this score, this is the methodology. It actually tells you that if CDP wants it in a different metric, it auto calculates that metric, etc. So it's our own in-house tool.
Okay. Ankit, somebody is asking what is NBSR? I think NBSR, somebody is writing wrongly.
Yeah, I don't think I've put NBSR anyway.
Okay. Now, our companies are required to conduct ESG audit, or is there any ESG score prescribed?
I think in the time, yeah. Upendra, you can respond.
Yeah, no, I think it depends how you look at it. I don't think there is an audit per se mandated from SEBI But my sense is once you have targets set up, which will come in 3 years' time, you will end up seeing some requirements. Outside of Indian context, you already have third-party verification for certain data parameters required for some of the global standards. So you actually have those SSR-based mechanisms. But I don't know, Ankit, if you
Yeah. I think ESG, even in the BRSR report, it talks about certifications that you've obtained with respect to various data points. So I think in the initial years, regulator will also rely on the certifications that companies have obtained. And I think Upendra, companies will have to obtain some kind of certifications to give some kind of authenticity to the data that they will be disclosing in their report, because data accuracy of data is always something in Indian context which is being questioned. So if you are a certified organization on various parameters, then this question will go. But as we see in case of regulators in India, audit at some point of time will be there to ensure that what you are disclosing is true in terms of the performance. So it's not there right now, but I think in times to come, it will definitely be there.
But Upendra, that is the government will make it compulsory that ESG reporting as well as ESG audit is required, because government cannot check each and everything. So they may require them because they think that professionals are their extended arm. So they will give them, so they can get what is missing, it can come. So we will see that.
No, I think, like I mentioned, that, and again, this is based on even the discussions and deliberations in this task force that the ministry has set up. And there's another one that NIF and Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance has set up, in which I am a member, that people are aligned to the idea that this is a must. Question is, what is the timeline in which it goes beyond the first 1,000? And frankly, in the top 1,000, Ankit, from your own experiences, you would know many of them get these audits done not because BRR or BRSR is required, partly sometimes because they're corporate assurance sustainability groups or corporate finance groups were needed for their investor relations when they are when they're reporting numbers, etc. So it's, or several times your buyers mandated. If you are a designated consumer against under BEE PAT scheme, you would need it irrespective. So a lot of this, that's why I said a lot of this may already be there, but a comprehensive ESG audit may become a reality in 5 years' time.
Okay. Is there an ESG score will also be like credit rating score? So do you think, Upendra, the ESG score will also be there? Because I want to identify the company. So ESG score will be the good parameter to cover everything. Will you see that?
Yeah, I see this, like I said, I see this as the direction no matter what. Just as your financial score, in fact, even for BRSR, SEBI is in the process of making the first cut of the XBRL taxonomy so that you can compare companies, right? Now, whether that taxonomy is going to be sufficient or not or needs enhancement is a separate thing. But the intent and the writing is there on the wall that this will be a parameter of comparison. This is a factor which is getting integrated into all financial services. RBI has now signed to NGFS, the network for financial green banking systems, and therefore the banks now are required to report back on what their portfolio looks like. It's starting with climate. You have always had compliance-based checks from the bankers, but you may start seeing more and more quantifiable measures. And the only way you could do that, Pawan, is then through a comprehensive ESG score.
Okay, so that is one.
But it doesn't exist today. One can get it at Ascribe. There are firms and that we do for several large private equity guys for their portfolio companies. We do this.
Okay.
We actually go use this as a mechanism or even a tool for valuation, frankly.
Okay, Upendra, somebody is asking that she's a student and a PhD student and her area is M&A. And she wants to understand possible implication of ESG reporting on overseas acquisition.
No, I think it's a great question. That is, so you are already seeing this as a mechanism on which you are doing risk discovery. What we also have started seeing is, just as every risk represents an opportunity, people are using this as a valuation tool as well to see that if you are able to enable a transformation on some of the E&S parameters, does it lead to a disproportionate enhancement of that company's market opportunity, linkage to others, etc. So all of this is coming into play when you are going for newer companies. Now, how does this play in acquisitions? I think the way this will play out in acquisitions is you will start seeing what kind of liabilities I'm going to accrue to begin with as a result of somebody not being in line or standards with your host country.
Okay.
Because the home country is already there, but the host country which is acquiring will start looking at that company, will start looking at it, and will, in my view, of course, for compliances, if you are not in adherence, it doesn't even fly. But there are others which are close to compliance measures. So, for example, CO2 footprint, it is not in compliance today, but tomorrow you could have a minimum measure that you need to maintain. For example, in the vehicle industry, you have CAFE, which is the combined emission norm that has now come for companies to kind of meet. So you will use that to gauge whether they are on track of that or not, and if they are not on track, what kind of liability does it present? So it is certainly an important tool in that sense.
Okay, Ankit, we were talking about the ESG from a technological point of view. Can you please elaborate on ESG from financial point of view? What I mean is how ESG will change the financial world. You can give, then Upendra can add.
Can you just come again, sir?
How the ESG will change the financial world.
What do you mean by financial? But in terms of financial sector or in terms of reporting?
Financial would mean the investment. The people will invest in money. People will.
I think that there are already a lot of investors who, I think Upendra is also into investing. So there are a lot of investors who are specifically looking into investing companies which are ESG compliant. They are ESG indices. Even mutual funds are now trying to build a portfolio of ESG compliant companies. So as and more the concept of ESG will gain importance, companies and investors will tend to invest in companies which are more ESG compliant. And with BRSR report becoming more quantitative, everybody in all stakeholders, including investors, would have a better idea in terms of the performance of a company on ESG parameters. And if there is a company, there are two companies in a similar sector, while one may be making profit as of now, but is low on ESG count, other is an average company but an high on ESG count, and there are probably chances of that company performing well in future in terms of both perceptibility and performance. Investing will definitely be looking into investing in such companies. So therefore, BRSR per se will become more important, and with BRSR, companies will definitely move towards to a better ESG regime.
Okay. You want to add something, Upendra?
No, I think Ankit has touched upon it. I think this is not just, it started with just as a exclusion outlook. Increasingly, it is being seen as a portfolio outlook. And I think it will become the standard outlook going forward. I don't think you will have an annual financial statement independent of this. In fact, there are some forward-looking companies globally. If you look at Puma, almost 5 years back, they started publishing something called an environmental P&L. So a P&L balance sheet adjusted for environmental liabilities and assets. And that is a direction. That is what integrated reporting will finally look like. So it may take 5 years, it may take 10 years, but that's where this is headed. Because
we have also seen when the corporate governance came, then the way companies came out with the new innovation, that was mind-boggling, and that was a competition with the competitors. That's a very interesting point. Okay, Upendra, this question we have discussed, but somebody has asked, which I want to take your view. Why do we require a driverless metro train in Delhi when jobs are dwindling? Imagine the fate of highway toll workers. Technology cannot be the reason to knock off jobs. It can be the case that few people in IT and IT tech company get a 10 to 50 crore package and at the cost of 1,000 people. He's just telling this, which I was also asking. And you are right. The technology came, the bank, the computerization, you have given an example on the bank, and it has given the new dimension, new peripheral. But there is a gap. When you shift from this to this, and the restlessness of the people is there, why can't we make, because today what is happening, you go to any emporium and they are giving it two types of sari. One is handmade sari and one is a machine made sari. Handmade sari is very costly. And people are realizing also, you go to the various websites, they are saying handmade product, and that is 10 times higher than the normal product. So people are realizing and they are giving value. So what is your view on this? That is it not one area that tomorrow you are bringing out technology and telling your all employees that please go. I don't require your services. Is it not the bad thing?
So I think one needs to look at it in both. In every coin has two sides, right? Let's take the case of handloom that you just talked about. So let's say everybody then goes for handmade thing. Many of the mechanized workers working in a textile factory will be without a job because they are not artisans, right? So you may enhance employment for one section and may disengage others as a result of that. But I think the larger point you're making, and perhaps the person, is how do we create a society where technology is a tool for improvement and not a tool for exclusion? How do we kind of ensure that everybody is kind of benefiting and not getting excluded because the technology is coming? So a driverless train in Delhi may or may not be a need. I don't know. I mean, right? Does it create an opportunity? Sure, it does create an opportunity for a particular kind of technology, and therefore that technology could create its own domino effect. In India being an innovative center for those technologies, and may create more jobs, but a certain section of the society may get excluded. So I think the response, in my view, and I think history has shown us this, is around how do you innovate, keeping the larger landscape in mind. So if there are any business school students or any management gurus on this webinar, there is a paper that I read many years back during my MBA days. It was written by a guy called Theodore Levitt, called The Marketing Myopia. It is one of the, I would say, the classic pieces of work. And what he illustrated was all the people in North America who saw themselves in the stagecoach business, but not themselves in a transportation business, lost their businesses every time there was a disruption. But people who saw themselves in transportation did not care whether you moved from stagecoach to buses, to yachts, to whatever, right? You were ahead of the curve thinking, okay, this is what is needed, this is where the demand is. So even in the case, if there are more people willing to buy handmade stuff, there is a premium to be given. It's a market demand. People will respond to it. There are people who buy a Maruti, there are people who buy a Mercedes. There's an opportunity for both. One doesn't need to negate the other, in my view.
Okay. So now there are. I will request both the speaker. Few questions are there, but very shortly we will discuss because time is overshooting. How can we ensure indirect matters applicable? For example, in service sector, number of things are not applicable to service sector.
So I think two things. I think one is the materiality map itself. Like I said, SASB has a materiality map. There are others. So you kind of gauge what parameter is relevant at a sector level, correct? And within that sector, then there are several industries, because services is also a broad label. You could be a logistics company, which will have a different implication than a consulting company, then audit company, etc. So one is a materiality map, right? The second is, even if you look at BRSR, in several cases, they are according that latitude, where you can justify, even in BRR, there was a justification why it is not relevant, right? So it's perfectly fine that you use those means. Question is, do people have enough adequate knowledge about what is applicable? And there are frameworks and tools available and guidance available that can be provided.
Okay. Ankit, any thin line between CSR, CSP and ESG?
I think ESG lies at the top of everything. Both CSR are part of your ESG practices.
Okay. Upendra, how we can ensure it on what basis do you recommend companies as a good company in terms of ESG? Can you please provide some brief of what all parameter does your tool takes into consideration?
Like I said, our tool has about 1,600 parameters. So, and BRSR itself needs 1,000+ data points if I look at E&S broadly without G. Okay. So it's difficult for me to summarize it. in that sense. But in terms of the first part of the question, which was more to do with, what is a good company? I think the fiduciary responsibility is in the opening statement that Ankit gave, that are we making sure our actions are such where we are in balance with the needs of the future? And that is the only way you can define it at the highest level, which can then get manifested in policies. How do I look at my environmental policy? If my plant is in Gurgaon, which is now got urbanized, how should I operate versus if I am, let's say, 500 kilometers from away? So my noise levels, my equipment, how do I look at it? How do I look at shared water resources if I'm in a community which is water stressed? There are very great examples, Aurangabad cluster or Arvind in Santej and Naroda, where they're using wastewater from the urban and municipal uses and using it for industrial use after cleaning it, so that they can coexist and grow. You're not growing at the cost of the community. So there are several methods and mechanisms in which one can craft good ESG practices. G, I think, Pawan, you and the corporate professional teams are best suited to tell them what they can do on G. But I think it's not something new, frankly. It is more structured. It is requiring us to be more responsive, and it will certainly put us under greater scrutiny. But there is good way to go about it.
Okay, so thank you very much, Upendra, giving questions. I was just for the benefit of all the participants. We are doing some work of some companies where we provide them the corporate value enhancer, how you can enhance your value. So in that case, I was telling every company that why can't you write about the ESG? So they are not aware of the ESG. So I'm just giving one simple example which you can use. There's one company which is producing LED bulb. So I told them that one side you are producing, second side you are selling. So what are you are producing? In that case, are you creating something and which is hitting environmental? And second is what you are producing, is it helping environmental to sustain, like LED bulb? If LED bulb is there, so your consumption will be less, your voltage will be less, carbon production will be less, because you have to create electricity and you have to create a bulb. So today you see each and everything, wherever you are working, something is there. I'm using in my home the glass. Okay, I'm using my socks. Everything, if I can reuse, I should use it. If I'm again and again cleaning it, again and again doing this, it means I'm using some natural resources which are dying. So we have to be very careful. The point is very simple. Everybody, not only corporate, individuals should be clear that what is happening around me, whether I'm contributing. No doubt the law is there, government is there, they are prescribing, investor is there, but the role of individual people are there. We are saying our rivers are bad because we are throwing something which realizing that mere ek dalne se kya farak padta hai. If we can start realizing this fact that everybody can contribute to make the country ESG compliant. So the role of Upendra, role of Ankit, role of Pawan, role of corporate professional, role of anybody who is doing this is important. Friends, I think the basic concept and the importance which Andrag sir and Upendra has told and Ankit has told you the entire parameter, I think with the partnership with C Kinetics and Upendra's team, we will bring out some good platform for all the people where the ESG compliance should not be only the paper compliance, but it should be in a spirit. The law is always for the spirit, not the letter. So letter plus spirit, if you are making an impact assessment, is really good. I think we will achieve our target, and we have to achieve this target because our commitment is towards the world which we are doing. So up to 2050, we have to bring out so many things, and all companies are started committing. So you will realize this. Today, your competitor is saying, I'm ESG compliant. and you are not ESG compliant, that means the production, the people will not buy goods from you. And tomorrow you see there will be one starting point that every product will have that this company is ESG compliant, like Hallmark, like the Hallmark things which is there, that they are certified something. So same thing, you have to realize this, that this competition is fairy. You should prepare today and get the maximum what you can get it. And this is not a cost. This is the service to the society, service to the nation, service to the humanity. And we all should work in this direction and make it successful. So thank you very much, Upendra. Thank you, Andrag sir, in his absence, and Ankit nicely presenting this thing for this, and all participants, those who have come and those who have asked questions. Friends, we will shortly share our product with everybody, and continuing our knowledge sharing aspects, which we are doing. Our 70th webinar will be, we are organizing on social stock exchange. This is the new concept which SEBI has approved, and we are organizing this program. And Mr. Jeevan, who is the CGM of SEBI, will be there. Dr. V.R. Narasimhan will be there. He was the dean of NIFM, and he was a ex SEBI officials and NSDL person. Mr. S. Badri Narayanan, he's a academician and working on social stock exchange. And then Dr. Sridhar LS, that will also speak about the social stock exchange. Anjali Agrawal from corporate profession, Nitesh Latwal from corporate profession will discuss. We have requested Mr. Harsh Kumar Banwala of the who is the NEFED MD, because he was a part of this committee of social stock exchange. And this social stock exchange is also one of the concept where the ESG and social stock exchange will complement after some time in a different way. So thank you very much, Upendra. Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Andrag sir, in absence. And thank you all participants for participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.